Welcome back to another episode of Her Expat Life. We are the YouTube channel that is dedicated to bringing female entrepreneurs, digital nomads, and expats all the information they need to advance their global lifestyle. Today, we are very happy to be speaking to a wonderful, wonderful guest, Andreia Trigo. Andreia Trigo is a multi awarded nurse consultant, lecturer, researcher, and TEDx speaker. Her mission is to improve accessibility to fertility care and support worldwide at minimal costs to populations. Combining her medical experience and her own infertility journey, Andreia founded the Enhanced Fertility Programme App. This is an evidence based program that improves accessibility to fertility education, support, and care. You can access the online program on your computer or download the app and join so many other women and couples who are already getting the support they need to achieve their reproductive goals. Today, we are going to be speaking to Andreia about her personal journey as well as the global fertility rates and how fertility treatment can be made more accessible. So, on that note, Andreia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be on your show today.
It's definitely a pleasure to have you. So, Andreia, let's start off right at the beginning and give people a bit of an understanding as to what got you on this path. So, could you share your personal journey with us? How did you get into the world of fertility treatment?
That is such a good question. And it started actually when I was very, very young, because I was just like any other teenage girl waiting for my periods to start, and they never did. And it was only after a few years of tests and investigations that they've realized that I had been born without a uterus. So that diagnosis of infertility was very challenging to cope with at the time. I was very young. I was definitely not trying to conceive, but I had it in my mind as a woman from a very big family where no one ever had fertility problems, that one day I would have my own family and be able to grow that and be part of that legacy. So realizing at such a young age that I couldn't conceive was very, very hard. And at the time, I was just about to start my university studies. I started studying my nursing degree. And for a few years, I just didn't want anything to do with fertility. The pain was too deep. I didn't want to focus on that. It was a constant reminder of what I would never be able to have. But a few years later, I realized that the only way to cope with my own pain would be to focus in the area of reproductive medicine. It has been my legacy now to try and transform that very painful journey, personal journey, into something positive, to try and bring a positive meaning to my journey, trying to give something positive to the world. And that's how everything started. So that was back in 2017 when I finally felt comfortable. Many, many years after my diagnosis, I felt comfortable moving into the world of reproductive medicine as a professional.
So you have very bravely shared publicly your journey of being born without a uterus. And in doing some research for today's interview, I watched a lot of your TEDx talks and
Yes.
conversations that you've had. And you discussed how having a positive attitude towards suffering may hold possibilities for the individual. So can you tell us how you were able to do this?
Yeah, that was the concept of my first TED talk back in 2018, how we can have a positive outlook into such a terrible diagnosis that happens to us. I remember being very young in my room crying, asking why me? Why is this happening to me? And I feel like probably everyone around the world will have experiences in their lives when they are so desperate and they are asking, why is this happening to me? So I found myself asking that question when I was just 17 years of age and not really understanding, why is there a meaning in all of this? But I remember very clearly crying, and I felt something so strong here in my chest, and I felt a light, and it was like I knew in that moment, and I've made a decision that I would be okay, that I would be happy, and no matter what, I would eventually be able to understand in the future. And that is such a powerful messaging that I got in that moment. Even if I don't understand now, I just trust that in the future things will make sense. So I didn't know how I was going to give meaning to my life. I didn't know how I was going to be happy after that. And it's not like a switch where I wasn't okay and now all of a sudden I am okay. It's not a switch, but it's a decision where I didn't leave any other possible chance, any other opportunity for things to be any differently to a happy life. So I think a lot of people will be able to resonate with that. It's almost like when life presents unthinkable challenges, we find this amount of strength within us that is so difficult. We don't even know where it comes from. And we make that decision, and then somehow along the way, everything starts adding up. And I honestly believe today that I do live a very happy life despite my circumstances. I wouldn't wish it on anyone else. I wouldn't wish infertility on anyone else. But for me, I took charge of the things that I could not control, and I gave it a positive meaning. So I made the best of a very unfortunate situation.
So before our interview, we chatted a little bit about our backgrounds, and both of us come
Yeah.
from Portuguese homes, which is a wonderful way to grow up. But there is a little bit of, I wouldn't say pressure, but expectation about the kind of family you will have one day. And it's very much the focus is, have children. Family is a very big thing in the community. So you've mentioned how your infertility journey made you question your identity in many aspects, including as a female, your self image, your self worth, your role in relationships, in your family, and in society. For someone who is sitting at home going through a similar journey, what message or advice would you like to give this person in finding or that sense of acceptance in their situation?
Yeah, that is true because I come from a very large family, and I think many people they never think that they're going to find it difficult to have children. Everyone just takes it for granted. And most people spend their 20s avoiding a pregnancy. And then
Yeah.
in their 30s, they might realize, oops, there is a problem. It's not happening as quickly and as easily as I thought it would. From one side, we have the pressure of family and society that keeps telling us that it's easy. Then we have sex education in schools that is only focused on avoiding a pregnancy. So there is definitely that pressure. And it's almost like a lot of people go through the motions of life trying to fulfill the goals that society has for them. And I was definitely at that stage where I thought that I was going to go to university to have a job that would allow me to pay my bills, get a house, fall madly in love with someone, get married, have 3 children, and just live happily ever after. And I think that's the image that society tells us that this is what's going to make you happy. This is what you
Yeah.
need to. And lots of people try and live up to those expectations, but it is incredibly difficult for a lot of people. Many people can't go through university. Many people, after going through university, can't find a job that is fulfilling to them. Many people
Yeah.
struggle with finding a partner. Many people struggling with having children. So for me, when I was 17 and I was feeling all those pressures, I've decided that I was only going to do something if it truly made me happy. I'm not going to do something that society expects of me. And that was the turning point because infertility challenged who I was, it challenged my identity, my dreams, but it also challenged me to choose. So now that you have the choice, the ability to choose who you want to be, what you want to do with your life in terms of career, in terms of relationships, what is it that you want that's going to make you happy? So I choose to see it that way. It challenged me to choose because it has taken absolutely I had for granted away from me. But I've flipped it around and I've tried to make it as now I have the choice. I'm not going to do what society expects of me anymore.
And I think aside from fertility, I think as females in particular, we really do struggle with finding ourselves, especially in our
Yeah.
20s, and trying to identify what it is that we really want to do versus what it is that we were conditioned to believe we should want to do. So I think yours is a very powerful testament to, even in the most challenging of circumstances, it really is a matter of finding yourself and what it is that you want to do, and not getting lost in everybody's idea of what your life should look like.
Expectations. Exactly.
Exactly. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the therapy modalities that you used in your journey and what they provided for you. So, as part of your recovery journey, you used logotherapy and neurolinguistic programming. Can you tell us a
Yes.
little bit about these modalities and what they gave you?
I still, when I realized back in 2017, it had been, many, many years since my diagnosis. And I've realized I am okay emotionally. Somehow I made it okay. And I look back, I've made that decision, and I didn't know how I was going to be okay, but I found myself 10 years later feeling, wow, I am now okay in my diagnosis. But most people who go through infertility don't have as long as I had, because most
Mm,
people are not diagnosed in their teenage years, they're diagnosed in their
yeah,
30s.
fair point.
So, how can I maybe translate what I've done to cope with it emotionally and give it to other people who don't have as much time to figure it out by themselves? So, I
Mm,
started to analyze what I had done over the years. And that's when I came across logotherapy and neurolinguistic programming. And I realized that is what I've done. I've done it, to myself naturally and by reading and speaking with therapists. But now it had a name, and now it had a process that I could teach other people to go through. So logotherapy is a very interesting modality where people search for meaning in things. And it comes from a very interesting psychotherapist from Austria. He wrote a book, Man's Search for Meaning, which I absolutely recommend to everyone. He explains that people find meaning in life when they can go through the most challenging problems in their lives, when they find a meaning and a reason to do something. So for me, my reason to cope with infertility was to be okay, to be happy. And I found my meaning, my purpose by dedicating my life mission to helping other people going through the same problem. And the neurolinguistic programming is a modality where we try to, it's a bit more like, we typically see a lot of people talking about coaching and how coaching helps them move from where they are to where they want to be in life. Neurolinguistic programming goes a bit deeper because it looks at your past as well. Because sometimes we can't move forward without understanding the conditioning that we've had from a young age.
Yeah.
Why is it that not having children is making me so sad? It's because I was conditioned to believe that having a big family is what's going to make me really happy. So neurolinguistic programming allowed me to understand my background, the way I was raised and influenced by my parents, my family, my teachers, and then realize that these beliefs and values that they instilled in me worked for them and their lives, but they weren't useful for me because I was finding myself in a situation that they hadn't been through themselves. So I had to challenge those values. I had to challenge those beliefs to create a reality that suited me. So
Mm,
the neurolinguistic programming allowed me to free myself from past beliefs and past values that I had been conditioned to finally say, I am okay. I can create my own reality now. And logotherapy allowed me to find a deeper meaning and take control of the situation when I felt I had no control whatsoever. So I find those two modalities so, so powerful, especially for
mm.
people who find themselves in desperate situations. I think they can apply those same techniques to find a way forward for themselves.
And it sounds like they work quite well together, because you have the element of looking back to understand what brought you to a point, and
Mm-hmm.
then the element of, with the logotherapy, like understanding how you can take the current situation and turn that into meaning to fuel you going forward. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
sounds like a good pairing and a good matching. Let's talk about fertility rates in general. So I think we're all quite aware that fertility rates are declining globally. From your perspective and your professional experience, why do you think this is happening and what are the consequences of this?
Yeah, so fertility rates declining is a huge problem globally. So we know that we need, on average, each couple to have 2.1 children so that when they die, the younger generation, their children can replace them. And that's how population is stabilized in a country so that we can all grow up, work, fund, pensions, support our elderly. And that's how things, the minimum, the basic, should be a stable population pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
But what we see happening now in most countries globally is that it's below 2 children per couple. In some countries, it's now even below one. So we are seeing an inverted pyramid where we have a lot of elderly people and not enough people being born. And of course, we have less people of working age to sustain and support the elderly. And it's a huge problem. It has huge consequences economically to every country around the world that is facing that reality. And I see it. There's different reasons why this is happening. And of course, number one is because people, for in some countries, you might remember in China, it wasn't permitted to have more than one child per couple for a very long time. And now they're seeing their pyramid invert. And now they're trying to encourage people to have more. And the same is happening in other countries where there was a certain freedom, but women find themselves being able to go to university, have a job, and they are prioritizing to evolve themselves before they have children. So we see the age at which women are having their first child increasing. So it's now around 35 years of age, as opposed to when I think about my parents, they had me in their early 20s. So
Yeah,
it's very, very different, right? So
very
the
different.
older we are when we start having children, we notice that our eggs, the quantity of eggs we have in our bodies as women reduces, the quality of those eggs also reduces. So on one point, there is us trying to improve ourselves, trying to be economically stable, to provide for a child and a family. But also there's the challenges of finding men and partners who want a committed relationship and who want children themselves, because it takes two to make a baby. And then in society, we also see that when women are pregnant, they lose a lot of years of their career
Yeah.
because they stay home. So they are less likely to be put forward for promotions, for new projects. So we are finding ourselves as women in a situation where for many, many years, we never had a place at the sitting table. We were not able to have a job. We were not able to have bank accounts. I mean, we know that the first man on the moon, we were able to put the first man on the moon before women were able to have a credit card and open a bank account.
That's crazy if you put it like that.
And now we have a seat at the table. We are able to go to work. We're able to be financially independent as women. But the moment we get pregnant, a lot of it is taken away because jobs and workplaces are not supportive of these stages of life that women go through. And if employers were more supportive, maybe women would be able to feel more comfortable to say, yeah, I will get pregnant, I will have children. So it's a problem globally. It's a societal problem that we need more incentives to have women feeling comfortable making the decision to get pregnant. And then on the other side, there's a small part of, male infertility that we know is declining globally. So
Yeah.
the World Health Organization defines what a normal sperm analysis should look like. And we know that those standards have been reducing over the years. So our grandparents had better sperm than our dads which have
Mm.
better than our husbands, our baby boys will already have plastics in their sperm and very much less quality.
Yeah.
So
Do
there's a
we know why?
combination.
Do we understand it is? Is there any idea as to why this decline is happening with sperm quality?
So people think that it's probably related with environmental factors.
Okay.
So the fact that sperm is the smallest cell in the human body and it's very fragile to everything that we do to our bodies. So the pollution, things that we eat, the plastics,
Like,
everything that can affect and make changes to sperm's DNA, which makes it less likely to then be able to fertilize the egg. So we have a combination on both sides that is fueling our global population. And I think for women, it's not like we're going to be able to convince women to have 5 children and start in their 20s again. I don't think that is ever going to be possible.
for the average
But
female, I don't think so. No.
but we need to find ways to support them in whatever their reproductive goals are.
Yeah.
So if they want to start later, maybe egg freezing can help them achieve that. Or if they want to start when they're 35 or 40, maybe there's technologies in reproductive medicine that they can use to achieve their reproductive goals. So it's more about supporting their choices with treatments and medical techniques that are available, supporting them socially so that the governments have solutions that allow them to make those choices, and the employers and organizations supporting them in making those choices. So we'll never have young 20-year-olds wanting 5 children as the norm anymore. But I think there's a lot that we can do to start to invert the pyramid again.
This leads me very well into the next question because personally, as someone who is now heading towards her late 30s and doesn't have kids but would like to have a family one day, I'm all of a sudden starting to pay attention to things that in my 20s did not interest me at all.
Yeah.
And the terrifying thing is the cost of a lot
Yeah.
of elements, right? And I think this is where your business comes in, and the work that you're doing. So, women who are needing to access fertility care are acutely aware of the high costs involved, right? Making
Yeah.
diagnosis and treatment accessible to a privileged few. So, can you talk to us through the average process of diagnosis and the most affordable options for treatment if someone is having some fertility issues?
Yeah. Accessibility to fertility diagnosis and care is a huge problem all over the world. And it starts because governments are not prioritizing fertility. I think they are just about to start now to see how the reducing population is going to have an impact economically in the country in not so many years. It's going to
Yeah.
be a few years until they start. So they are starting to want to incentivize people. And we see, for example, France a few months ago when Emmanuel Macron said that they were going to test everyone and provide free testing for everyone. So they are starting to see the problem,
Yeah.
but there are still a lot of inequalities. It's not like fertility diagnosis and care is on par with other medical problems. So if you have diabetes, hypertension, cancer, the process to be tested, diagnosed, and treated is very quick in the majority of situations. And in most countries in Europe, you have access to free healthcare to solve that problem. When we're talking about fertility, the reality is not the same. They see it almost as an elective thing,
Yeah.
as a choice. So in most countries, people either don't have access to appropriate testing that they need. So they may not have access to sperm testing, blood testing, all of that. And most often they don't have access to the required number of treatment cycles to get to baby. Because when we are going through IVF, we know that on average, people need 3 cycles because it's a bit of trial and error. We give you some drugs, we're trying to see how your body responds, and it's a funnel where we get a lot of eggs, hopefully, and some of them fertilize, some of them grow, some of them implant. So it's a numbers game. And if we don't have access to a good amount of cycles, then we'll never be able to provide that treatment for women. So what we see is a lot of private clinics trying to help patients. The
Yeah.
treatment privately is expensive, especially in Europe where it's not included in health insurance policies. First, most people in Europe don't have a health insurance. And
Yeah.
those who do, fertility treatment is not included,
Mhm.
which is a problem. So people end up having to find ways to pay for treatment. We are looking at a treatment cycle that can range, including medication, anything, hopefully 5,000 euros or pounds if we're talking in some countries in Europe. But if we're talking about the UK, that's going to be around 10,000
Wow.
for a cycle.
For
So
one cycle.
we see people who remortgage their homes. We
Wow.
see people that ask for financing just to pay for this. And it puts so much pressure in a situation that is already very charged emotionally. Because then you have not only the pressure of trying to have a baby, but then you have the financial pressure. And then you have the relationship pressure. And it's quite a lot. So a lot of people try to travel. So we see a lot of people, for example, in the UK, where treatment is expensive and they may find themselves where they can't afford to pay that amount of money for a cycle. And they do decide to go abroad for treatment where they can do maybe 2 or 3 cycles for the cost of one. So there's a lot of fertility tourism, people going to Spain, Cyprus, Greece for treatment. We also see, because there's not, in some countries, treatment is not allowed, not all treatments, for example, egg donation not being allowed in some countries, surrogacy not being allowed in some
Yeah.
countries. And for some people, that is the only way for
Yeah.
them to become parents. So people also travel to search for those solutions and try to make it more economically cheaper, more affordable, but also more likely to have a baby, because you're more likely to have a baby if you do 3 cycles than if you only have money for one cycle, then the chances are much lower. So for us, for me personally, accessibility is really important. I don't think fertility diagnosis and fertility treatment should be a privilege. I think it should be accessible through national health services. I think government should fund fertility treatment just like they fund treatment for medical problems, because infertility is a medical problem,
Absolutely.
recognized, and it should be covered. That not alone because of that, but also because it has huge economical consequences to society. But I think we are very far from having that happening through governments, unfortunately. So what I have been trying to do is to try and make it as affordable as possible, as easy as possible for people. At Enhanced Fertility, we provide tests that are about 3 times cheaper than if patients were to go privately to a lab. And we provide results 3 times faster as well, which means that for someone who would take maybe 6 months before starting treatment, they can start in about 1 month or 2 months. So we try to make it as fast as possible and as affordable as possible for you to get to a diagnosis, because we can only decide on treatment once we know what is preventing you from getting pregnant. And I think the next stage for us is trying to optimize the treatment cycle, because there's still so much trial and error. Clinics go a lot, of course, by the experience of their doctors. Like in most medicine, we do things based on evidence, we do things based on our experience and maybe thousands of patients that we've seen. But the problem with fertility is that there are so many variables in the, and what we are doing at the moment is trying to use big data to analyze what has worked for patients that had exactly the same parameters as you. So with the same blood results, same sperm results, same scan results, patients who have tried treatment A, B, or C, what has worked for them. So hopefully we can be closer to eliminating the trial and error, and doctors will be able to give a more balanced advice on what treatment to suggest. So hopefully that will help improve accessibility.
At least narrow down the time frame of trying to figure out exactly what is wrong and the possible solutions, because it sounds like that takes a substantial amount of
A
time
long,
and money. Yeah.
absolutely.
You mentioned that your company is trying to help people access cheaper testing and faster testing. Who is this available for? Is it available for the European market? Who can access this service?
At the moment, it's available for everyone in the UK and Europe.
Okay.
So, regardless of where you are, and we're very proud of this. So, even if you are in an island in the middle of nowhere and there's not a fertility clinic in your island, we can get testing to you, we can get a diagnosis to you, we can get a doctor doing a remote assessment and deciding on next steps. Wow. So, regardless of where you are in Europe, even if you're not in a big city, we can get the testing to you. And we are very, very proud of that, because for many people for whom testing and treatment in babies were not something that they thought they would be able to afford, now that is a reality.
That is truly amazing, because I think access as well to physical resources for those who are living in the rural areas or a little bit off the grid, like you've said, makes it very challenging. So you've touched a little bit on how technology is going to be helping people that process. And you recently did another TEDx talk specifically on AI. So how do you see AI helping global fertility care, and what is the timeline you're imagining? How long can we expect before we see these changes?
That's a great question. I think AI can be a great tool to help fertility doctors, nurses, and embryologists do their jobs a bit faster and better, because we are only humans and our brain is very limited by our human capacity to process and analyze this amount of information that is growing all the time. There's so much research coming out, it's impossible for a doctor to read everything, to analyze everything, to absorb everything. They are incredibly busy. So all healthcare professionals, they do their best. They go to their conferences to stay up to date. They treat as many patients as they can, but we are human and we are limited. What artificial intelligence can do is process all the data for us and help us make better clinical decisions. So in the area of fertility and reproductive medicine, a lot of the clinics are already using artificial intelligence in the lab. So, for example, when we collect eggs and sperm and we make an embryo, a lot of the clinics are already using this kind of technology to monitor the eggs, the sperm, and the embryos to make a better decision on which one is more likely to result in a baby. And that is amazing. So it's not replacing anyone's jobs, but it's helping them make a better job. It's about, think about when we switch from typewriter to computer, and it's just helping us do our jobs better and faster now that we have computer and we have the internet. But I think there's still a lot of evolution in AI. And where I see the biggest opportunity is where we have all this data from all the blood tests, the scans, the swabs, and we try to make sense of all of it because our bodies are so complex. And then you have two human beings because you need an egg and a sperm, and trying to make sense of all of that. So AI helps us analyze and see exactly what has worked for other people with that problem. In the future, I also think that artificial intelligence will help us see patterns that our brains are not seeing, because 20% of all infertility at the moment is still unexplained. Wow. So we still don't know. And I think big data, artificial intelligence will maybe give us some of those answers and maybe point us towards some treatment solutions that up to now we just don't have a treatment solution. For example, for endometriosis or PCOS that are still very much chronic. So I see huge advantages. I think a lot of it is already happening, and a lot of it will happen within the next 5 years. It's going to be completely transformational.
Wow. Okay. So the future is looking hopeful in conclusion, right?
I think so. And with it comes accessibility as well. Because when we know that for these patients, this is what works. And instead of 3 or 5 cycles, we only need one, and we can get it right first time. Maybe governments will start saying that's okay to support that, because instead of giving 2 cycles to everyone, we're giving everyone what each person needs.
Yeah, which will
And
cut the costs and help also alleviate the problems that they are facing from a, I would imagine, a financial perspective, trying to support this issue.
absolutely. And when we look at people who are in remote locations, or people who are in Africa who don't have immediate access to the specialists, all of these solutions will improve accessibility and hopefully help a lot of people grow families when they never thought it would happen for them.
So, Andrea, let's talk about an imaginary case study. So,
Okay.
let's imagine we have a female who's maybe in her late 20s or early 30s who's starting to really think about fertility, and she knows she wants to have a family one day. She doesn't currently feel ready, but she wants to set herself up as much as possible for success in the future. What advice would you give this person in maximizing their possibility of starting a family at a later stage?
So I think what is really important is for the woman who is in her early 30s to be able to make an informed decision. And it will be different for everyone, but if you're a woman in your early 30s and you have some symptoms, then it's best to get that investigated. And by symptoms, I mean, let's say if you have irregular cycles, very short or very long, if you have pain, if you have spotting, if there's anything that you feel is not normal, you need to speak with a medical person. So it's not like you need to try and conceive at that moment to try and seek the answers. It's good to know, because that will allow you to make decisions later in life. If you are in your early 30s and let's say you're not in a relationship, we know that our fertility starts declining by the age of 35. And we have a choice these days. Do we want to wait and see if we find someone and try and have things happen the natural way? But we can also make the choice of, I'm going to freeze my eggs, and it's never a guarantee that the eggs that are frozen will result in a baby. But it gives us an extra option. And so we can say, let's freeze our eggs. And, if I do end up meeting someone over the next 2, 3, 5, 7 years, of course, we'll always try and get pregnant naturally. But those eggs are there just in case. We know that younger eggs under the age of 35 are better. You're more likely to have more eggs in that stimulated cycle. They're probably going to be of better quality. So even if you are older, if you do end up needing them, at least you have a better chance at that. Testing if you are concerned, testing if you want answers for yourself, and that would typically involve testing your bloods. We want to see if your hormones are going up and down at the right times of the cycle. Typically, we would check your FSH, your LH, your estrogen, progesterone, your AMH levels. We would do a pelvic ultrasound. This would give us an image of your uterus, your ovaries. So that way you can make an informed decision. I would say this could be important for someone in their early 30s trying to make decisions, but I wouldn't say that everyone in their early 20s should be tested, for example, because we know that most people, if you don't have symptoms in your early 20s and you're not trying to conceive, there is no point being tested.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very important message, because there's a lot of people going on Facebook and receiving these ads and thinking that maybe there's a problem with them when there isn't a problem. So if you have symptoms and if you're concerned, you test at any age, of course. But if you don't have symptoms and you're not trying to conceive, there's no point testing. In your early 30s, you're getting close to that age where fertility starts declining. So I would say it's important to make decisions. Do you freeze? Do you not freeze? And testing in that context can be very powerful, because it can help you make informed decisions.
Okay. And Andrea, just before we wrap up today, as the CEO and founder of Enhanced Fertility Program, what is your vision and hope for the future?
my hope for the future is that everyone is able to get the diagnosis and treatment they need to grow their families, regardless of where they are in the world, regardless of their financial situation, regardless of the country where they are. I just think that everyone should be able to access the care they need, and it shouldn't be a privilege available to only a few people like it is at the moment.
And Andreia, how do people get in touch with you?
Yes, so they can find me on my website, www.efp.clinic. And of course, if you search Enhanced Fertility, we are on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all the social media platforms.
We'll make sure to link all of those platforms in the comment section or in the information box below. And with that, Andreia, thank you so much for joining us today. I think your vulnerability and sharing your story, your strength in overcoming your challenges, and your vision for helping women deal with this very difficult topic is so inspiring, and it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. It has been a pleasure.
For anybody who would like us to pursue any of the topics we discussed today in more detail, please feel free to share in the comment section your personal journey, any concerns that you have, any confusion or misinformation you might be trying to sort through. We'll try our best to get more experts on the show to help with that. And just in general, what would you like us to focus on? Please share with us your thoughts, topics that you would like us to deep dive into. Please just remember to visit our website, herexpatlife.com, to get an idea of all of the services that we provide. We are a boutique global mobility firm that helps female expats, digital nomads, and entrepreneurs, creatives, and professionals, as well as investors, advance their global lifestyle. And we do this through membership programs with co working and co living spaces and a range of other topics. We also have an app that helps females abroad network with each other. So you can visit our website to get more information. Follow us on Instagram. Make sure to follow and subscribe here on YouTube. And until next time, take care. And Andreia, thank you once again for speaking with us.
Thank you.